The wind scraped across the high plains, cold and thin, carrying the smell of dust, old grass, and something darker, something that made Samuel Reed draw his scarf tighter around his face as he rode. His mare, a rangy roan with ribs like fence posts, snorted and shifted beneath him. The sun was leaning west, burning through the smoky haze that hung over the horizon. He hadn't planned to ride this far out, but the silence of the day had pressed too heavy on him at home. The cabin was small, and the ghosts too large. So he'd ridden east, toward the river and the empty land, where the wind could scour the ache from his thoughts. It wasn't unusual to see smoke out here. Travelers still tried their luck on the Wagon road, and sometimes they lit campfires, sometimes the prairie itself caught fire when lightning struck. But this smoke had a different color, black at the root, smudged gray as it rose. Something was wrong. He pressed his heels to the horse and urged her into a trot, then a canter. The closer he got, the worse it smelled. Burned wood, scorched leather, and under that, the sharp, sour tang of death. He slowed the horse as the scene came into view. A wagon lay splintered on its side, its canvas burned away to a ragged skeleton of ash. One wheel still turned lazily in the wind, creaking like an old hinge. Bodies lay scattered around the blackened wreck. He counted 4 before he stopped looking. Men, mostly. One had an arrow buried deep in his back. Another had fallen near the oxen yoke, face turned toward the ground, hand clutching the dirt. The horses were gone, the yokes cut. Samuel dismounted slowly, the leather of his saddle groaning in the quiet. He took his rifle down, more from habit than fear. Whoever did this was long gone. He could tell by the vultures circling above, and by how stiff the corpses already looked. He walked through the wreckage, boots crunching on broken glass and charred cloth. He found a small trunk that had been split open, spilling fine clothes across the dirt, silken lace, too fine for the trail. There were jewelry boxes too, smashed open and emptied. He crouched beside one of the wagons, turning over a brass clasp in his hand. It was embossed with a crest, a rearing stag beneath a crown. Not the sort of thing you saw much out here. Whoever these people were, they hadn't belonged on this road. He was about to mount back up when he heard it, a faint sound, buried beneath the whistle of the wind. A cough. He froze, listening. It came again, weaker this time. He followed it around the far side of the wagon, heart quickening. A woman lay half hidden beneath a torn canvas tarp, blood staining the front of her dress. Her skin was pale, her eyes half open, unfocused. She tried to lift her head when she saw him but couldn't. "Easy," he said quietly, kneeling beside her. "You're safe now." Her lips moved, but no sound came out. He reached for his canteen, lifted her head, and poured a trickle of water against her mouth. She swallowed once, coughing. He saw the blood again, dark, dried in streaks down her arm and across her bodice. "How long you been out here?" he asked, more to himself than her. She blinked slowly, eyes struggling to focus. Her accent, when she spoke, startled him. 2 days. Her voice was soft but clipped, like the women he'd heard once in the cities back east, when he was young and dreaming of a life that never happened. "Can you move?" She shook her head slightly. Her right ankle was twisted under her, swollen and purple. He looked around, there was nothing left to make a litter from. No wagon canvas that wasn't burned through, no horses, no shade. He weighed his choices. He could ride back for help, but by the time he returned she'd be gone. The nearest town was 20 miles, and the sheriff there would ask questions neither of them had time for. "I'll get you out of here," he said, more firmly than he felt. She didn't answer, just closed her eyes. He slid his arms beneath her, she was lighter than he expected, and carried her to the roan. The horse shifted nervously, but he calmed her with a low word. He lifted the woman up, settling her sideways in the saddle, then climbed up behind her, holding her steady as he turned the horse toward home. It took most of the night to get back. The stars came out bright and cold above the plains, and she slipped in and out of consciousness, her head resting against his chest. Once, she murmured something, names, maybe. A Henry, and a Louisa. He didn't ask who they were. He just told her to rest. By the time the cabin came into view, his arms were numb, and she was barely breathing. He carried her inside, laid her gently on the cot by the fire, and lit a lamp. The place was bare, just a table, 2 chairs, a stove, and the smell of old wood smoke, but it was shelter. He boiled water, cleaned her wounds, and bandaged what he could. A gash along her shoulder, bruises down one side, the ankle swollen badly. She was lucky to be alive at all. When he finally sat back, the fire had burned low. Her face, in the lamplight, was too fine for the frontier. High cheekbones, delicate features, a small scar near her temple. Her hands, even bloodied, looked unworked, soft, uncalloused. She wasn't built for this land. He pulled a blanket over her and sat beside the fire. The crackle of the wood filled the silence. He thought about asking who she was, but the exhaustion settled in like lead. It was easier to watch the flames and pretend that tonight wasn't strange, that he hadn't just found death and nobility tangled together on the same patch of dirt. When dawn came, she woke screaming. He was already up, brewing coffee, when it happened, a sharp cry that made him drop the tin mug. She tried to sit up, eyes wild, and he crossed the room quickly, pressing a hand to her shoulder. Easy. You're safe. It's over. She blinked, breathing hard, eyes darting around the cabin. It took a moment before she recognized him. The wagon's gone, he said softly. I buried what I could. Her mouth trembled. She turned her face away, one hand covering her eyes. He didn't know what to say. Death was something he understood too well, but comfort wasn't. I'm Samuel, he said finally. Samuel Reed. After a pause, she whispered, Clara. That your first name or last? She hesitated. Both, for now. He raised an eyebrow but didn't press. Out here, everyone had a secret. He poured her a mug of water and helped her drink. Her movements were careful, each one like it cost her something. For the next few days, she slept more than she woke. Samuel worked outside when he could, cutting wood, tending to the fence, but he found his thoughts drifting back to her, to the way she stared into the fire when she was awake, her gaze distant, almost haunted. She spoke little, but when she did, her words carried an education he hadn't heard in years. She asked about the land, about how far the nearest town was, about the mail routes. Once, she asked if there were Indians nearby, her tone not fearful but curious. He watched her heal slowly. Her ankle mended, though she still limped. She took to helping him around the cabin, washing dishes, sweeping, even trying to mend one of his shirts, though she pricked her fingers more than once. He caught her once, staring out the window at the wide, empty horizon, her eyes shining with unshed tears. He pretended not to notice. One evening, after supper, she asked quietly, Why did you help me? He looked up from his plate. Would have been wrong not to. There were others, she said, voice tight. Dead. You could have taken what you wanted and left me. He set the fork down, the metal clinking against the tin. Ma'am, I've lost enough people in my life to know that leaving someone to die sits on a man's soul forever. I don't need another ghost. She studied him for a long moment, something unreadable passing over her face. Your wife. He nodded. 2 winters ago. Fever took her. I'm sorry, she said softly. Me too. The silence after that wasn't heavy. It was almost peaceful, like they'd both found a quiet place between griefs. Weeks passed. The weather warmed, and the prairie bloomed with yellow grass. She began to walk farther each day, collecting herbs by the creek, helping mend the roof. Her laugh, rare at first, came easier now. He found himself looking for reasons to hear it. Still, he knew something wasn't right. The fine clothes she'd arrived in, even torn and bloodstained, weren't those of a settler. The signet ring he'd found in her trunk, gold, engraved with that same stag and crown, wasn't something ordinary folks owned. When he'd asked about it, she'd claimed it belonged to her father, then changed the subject. One morning, he rode into town for supplies. The sheriff, an old man with one good eye, mentioned something that made his stomach turn. Rangers came through last week. Said there was a wagon party hit north of here. Some English lady traveling with guards and a banker. They say she was married to some nobleman, baron or something. All dead, poor souls. Still missin' one body though. Figured maybe she burned up in the fire. Samuel kept his expression steady, though his mind raced. That's so. Reckoned she was worth a fair bit. Reward posted in Denver, I hear. $10,000 for word of her. Can you imagine that? 10,000. Samuel nodded, bought his flour and salt, and left without another word. The ride home felt longer than usual. That night, Clara sat by the fire, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked up when he came in, smiling faintly. You were gone long. He set the supplies down and said nothing. He poured himself a drink, his hand tight around the bottle. "They're looking for you," he said finally. Her face went still. "Who?" "Rangers. Sheriff says they're huntin' for a baron's wife. Said she died in a wagon massacre. Only she didn't, did she?" She closed her eyes, then opened them again, calm but sad. "I suppose I should have told you. Would have been nice to know if I was hidin', a fugitive." "I'm not a fugitive," she said quickly. "My husband, Baron Whitcomb, was killed in the attack. We were on our way to San Francisco to claim an inheritance. Someone wanted him dead. I barely escaped. Who? I don't know. But whoever it was, they'll come looking to finish the job." He stared into the fire. "Then I should take you to the law." "You could," she said quietly. "And they'd send word to London. They'd drag me into courts and inquiries. But the men who did this, they're not lawmen, Samuel. They're powerful. They'll find me again." He looked at her then, really looked, and saw the fear beneath her calm. She wasn't lying. Or if she was very good at it. "You saved my life," she said. "Let me leave quietly, and I'll never bring trouble to your door." He shook his head slowly. "You won't last 2 days out there alone. Then what would you have me do?" He didn't answer. The room was filled with the sound of the wind outside, rattling the shutters. Days passed in uneasy silence. She avoided his eyes, spending more time by the creek, writing in a small leather notebook she kept hidden in her skirt pocket. He told himself it wasn't his concern, that he'd done his duty. But every time she limped past him, something inside him twisted. One afternoon, he came back from chopping wood to find her gone. Panic hit like a hammer. He grabbed his coat and rifle and followed her tracks, faint prints leading toward the road. He found her near dusk, standing by the wreckage of the wagon, now nothing but blackened boards half buried in dust. She was holding something, an old locket, tarnished and bent. "I thought maybe there'd be something left," she said when he approached. "A memory. A piece of what I lost." "You shouldn't be out here," he said. "I had to see it one last time." He watched her kneel by one of the graves he'd dug, her fingers tracing the rough wood of the cross. The wind tugged at her hair, and for a moment, she looked like she belonged to the land itself, lonely, enduring, scarred. He crouched beside her. "You don't have to run. Not yet. Stay until you're strong enough." She looked at him, eyes bright with tears. And what happens then? He didn't know. Maybe he didn't care. When they rode back together in the fading light, the horizon glowed gold, and for the first time in years, Samuel felt something like peace. He didn't know who she truly was or what dangers would come next. All he knew was that the silence of his cabin no longer felt like a tomb, and that in saving her, something in him had begun to heal. Far behind them, in the shadows of the dying sun, a rider watched from a ridge, the gleam of a rifle catching the last of the light before fading into darkness.